the relation of mover and the move. And I wanted to start us off. Um, Here we go, in chapter 2. So it's at the very beginning of chapter 2. It says, a first mover, not as that for the sake of which, but that from which the source of motion is together with the thing moved. And by together, I mean that nothing is between them, for this is shared by every mover and moved thing. And since there are three motions of place and of this sort, and of the so much, the movers too must be three. What carries something along, what alters something, and what increases or decreases something. So I was really interested in this idea that a first mover is together with the thing moved. And by together, I mean that nothing is between them, for this is shared by every mover and moved thing. And I guess my kind of first question was, are we understanding that to mean that there's nothing between them at the point of movement? Or are we taking that to mean that once that interaction has happened, that there is some long-lasting connection between them?
I think it means like as you're pushing something, you move along with it for a bit
Mm,
because of like you're propelled along with it until it goes on its own.
okay. So then that kind of makes sense for why he says that if there are three kinds of motion, and if I recall correctly, let's see what we talked about. Um, I don't know if he was talking about the thing, the time, the quality that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, but um, if it is kind of like that maybe that's what he means by the latter part, that um, the mover is two, must be three. Uh, uh, um, so the three motions are a place of this sort, of the so much, which is a little vague to me, but it might have it in my notes what he was talking about there. But the movers two must be three, what carries something along, what alters something, and what increases or decreases something. So how I guess how would you equate, Allison, that with what you were saying with pushing something? Are you saying that like it carries something along in the sense that um if it's pushing it, then it's carrying along like momentum or something, and that
Yeah,
the alteration is the movement, and then the increase or decrease would be the change of place?
yeah. Because I think like when you're pushing something, you've got that momentum, and then it's like you're transferring the energy to the thing that you're pushing.
Hmm.
So as you're accelerating and you're pushing, and then you get to that thing and you're pushing it, and so you're traveling together for a while, and then eventually the energy in a sense is transferred to the other object that's then accelerated on its own.
Okay.
If that makes
Um,
sense.
yeah. So, and I'm looking at the next paragraph. Now, everything that changes place is moved either by itself or by something else. In as many of these as are moved by themselves, it's obvious that moved and mover are together, since the first mover is present in them, so that nothing is in between. But as many are moved by other things, are moved by yeah, that's it. But as many as are moved by other things must come about in four ways. For there are four kinds of change of place by means of something else: pulling, pushing, carrying, whirling. So um, I can hear what you're saying there by pulling or pushing or something being carried along. So like I'm guessing maybe like the wind and a leaf or something. Do you
Right.
think that's a good way of thinking about the carrying?
Yeah. Yeah. It could be like that. Yeah.
So yeah, were you gonna say something else?
No, but anytime, even like if a rock is like moving, getting pushed by the wind and then it sort of carries the dust along underneath it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, like lots of times when things are kind of being pushed, they don't just go on their own, they're dragging along whatever's underneath it. So that's sort of carrying it along in a way.
Okay.
And the whirling, because sometimes if something's pushed, it's not at a straight line, like if it's at an angle or if it's sort of the momentum's curving, that could create like whirling leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then if there's nothing in between them, then the what exactly is happening to the mover whenever the motions are no longer happening? Like, is it just he's saying that there's nothing in between the mover and the moved? I think I was asking earlier, was that is it in the sense that um the moving in motion he's talking about, that like what happens when the motion when the wind dies down or something, or it's not moving um moving thing anymore.
Well, it's kind of like when you're on one of those moving sidewalks at the airport, and if
Hmm.
you're walking on it, and then when you come off of it, you're walking really fast because the floor stopped, but it takes you a while to deaccelerate, and to get back to a normal pace. So I think it's sort of like that in a way. Like eventually the thing that's pushing is going to stop moving, but once it's pushed the object and it's moved, it just there's a lag time before it can stop completely.
Oh, but are they separated at that point? That's kind of my question. Like once the momentum from the movement is gone, are they now distinct things, the mover and the moved?
Eventually, yeah, but sometimes it can take a little time.
Hmm. So then the whole idea of the nothing is between them is kind of that uh that once a first mover has done its action, like the touching between them. I don't know if Aristotle uses, but Sachs does in the kind of commentary, that the touching of he uses the phrase touching the body of the thing moved. That then would be that there's nothing in between them. That like
Yeah, I think
once the mover is enacting upon the thing moved, that there is nothing in between them, like the actual physical touching, like the affecting of one thing on another.
yeah, I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm confused.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I guess I'm trying to say is that is the fact that there's nothing in between them, is another way of saying that, is that when the mover touches upon the moved, that is what he means by, at least Sachs means that, um the he says touching the body of the thing moved, that is the what the first mover does, that the mover like affects or touches whatever the thing is, and that because of that touch or that interaction, that moves it together. And I guess I'm just wondering, is like that there's nothing in between, is Aristotle saying that that's the touching? Like whenever, like if I push my glass off my desk and it falls to the floor, like my hand and the glass touching, that is what he's talking about with nothing being in between the mover and the move.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what it
Okay.
meant. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. Hmm. Yeah, and then over the next two, yeah, go for it, Greg. There's only a few of us, so you can just speak up.
What's meant by the first mover is present in them? That seems different from nothing is between. Nothing is between would be touching, but what does it mean for the first mover to be present in them?
So what would it mean for the first mover to be present in the thing moved?
Yeah,
Are you asking that as a question?
yeah, because that didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I think that Alice and I have been trying to get at that question, that it seems that if there's nothing in between them, that's whenever the mover is like pushing or pulling, or what was the other one? Carrying or whirling. So whenever those actions of the mover are happening on a thing move, that is what it means, that there's nothing in between them.
Well, nothing in between is touching. Two different things.
That's what Sachs that's how Sachs describes it. He's saying, is on page 186, he says it's touching the body of the thing moved.
But so if A is touching B and there's nothing in between, what and A is pushing B, what does it mean to say that A is present in B? They're
Is that
two
is
different.
that yeah, is that something from the text, the present part that you're talking about?
Yeah, the like the middle half of that long, I guess, for second sentence.
In the first paragraph of chapter 2.
The second paragraph.
Okay. Um,
So the new
yeah.
paragraph.
So the first mover is present in them, so that nothing is in between. Yeah, I guess that's the interesting part, that to say that nothing is in between them and that the mover is present in them. I guess according to what Allison and I have been kind of, I guess, teasing out, it's like the presence is the motion of the first mover. That, my hand is present in the cup because the cup was previously just sitting there. But then whenever I started pushing it, my hand's force is in the cup somehow. That's interesting to me as well. How does that sound, Greg? What issues do you have with it? You're muted. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Just that your hand is not in the cup. It's touching it. And I even looked the other translation, the Reeve has something very similar. It says the primary mover is within the things themselves.
Yeah. Do you think he might be getting ahead of it, like setting up what happens in the next book when he talks about the first mover?
I do not know what happens in the next book.
Yeah. Um, that was like originally my thought, was that maybe he was setting himself up for like this idea of the first mover, which comes in the next couple books. But it is very weird because it almost seems like if the first mover is ultimately going to become the thing that starts all motion, an original push to get the universe started, then it does kind of seem like there's like room for spirituality there, right? To say that, whatever thing is moved, the thing that moves it, there's some part of that thing that moves it that's in the thing that's moved.
There's, I guess, two things, because here I was thinking this isn't the first mover, capital F, capital M yet. But there's some medieval doctrine, I can't remember if it's got a name, but it's that idea that you were just saying, that somehow what puts something in motion, the moved thing is dependent on, so let's say A puts B into motion. B is dependent on A, not just for its beginning, but for its continued motion. And that usually gets put into an argument about existence, but it seems like the same thing, because it seems obvious that one thing can exist after its cause does, and obvious that one thing can continue moving after its cause has stopped moving. But there was some medieval doctrine that was accepted that claims that if it's cause, that if a thing's cause at all stopped, then the thing caused B would somehow no longer be able to exist or move or do whatever it was doing. And so I see a hint in here, but I can't remember if that medieval idea has a name.
Yeah, and you know, on the next two pages, it seems like he really wants to hammer away at that point. I'm just looking at 176 in the first complete paragraph that begins with "end of these." He says at the end, if what pushes and what pulls are together with what is pushed and what is pulled, it is clear that nothing is between the mover and the move with respect to place. That seems very interesting too, because he's saying they inhabit the same place as well. So I almost wonder if, like, the whole A-B thing that you were talking about, like how they might be distinct entities, A and B, but I mean, is there ground for him saying that something can inhabit the same place as something else?
You know, I was thinking about it in terms of like the size of objects, the mass of objects, I was thinking of that, like when you think about if something's pushing something, it depends on not just the thing that's pushing, but the thing that is pushed. So I kept thinking about it in terms of, weight and mass and height, with all of that. I really hadn't thought about the idea of a kind of a spiritual component. But it's so funny because I just started this novel where somebody, like, I don't know, travels through time. It's kind of like, so it's very strange. I was just reading that before we started this. And I really hadn't considered that at all, but that's an interesting idea. It's almost like Aristotle predated space-time continuum several thousand years.
And I know this ends up sort of becoming the cosmological argument, but that's different from the thing that we're looking at, that weird twist, because the cosmological argument has like the things A and B seem separate, but there's something weird going on here with them seemingly possibly not being separate.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put a star by that section because, yeah, you're right. That's a strange thing. So I'm looking at the next page, the argument for alteration. So long as the thing altered, this is towards the end of that big paragraph above 10. So long as the thing altered is altered by means of perceptible things, in all of these cases, it is evident that the end of the thing causing alteration and the beginning of the thing being altered are together. For with the one, the air is continuous, and with the air, the body. Again, color is continuous with light, and the light with the eyesight. And hearing and the sense of smell work in the same way. For the first mover next to the thing moved is the air. And similarly with taste, for the juices together with sense of taste. And it is the same way as well with soulless and non-perceptive things. Therefore, nothing is between the thing altered and the thing causing alteration. That seems to take it, a step farther when he's talking about the light and eyesight. The analogy he's trying to draw is that it seems to be like eyesight is a capacity to see light. So then I'm wondering if he's saying that everything has a capacity to be moved, and that because it has a capacity to be moved, it is connected spiritually. And by spiritually, I don't mean like in a theistic way. I just mean that there is some makeup of everything in its capacity to be moved. And because of that, it's linked to whatever can move it. Which seems like an extraordinary thought.
Because something just struck me, and I'm gonna use the words I'm not supposed to because I keep forgetting Sachs' phrasing, but that potential and actual, that whether it's moving or learning, that somehow what's happening has to be potentially in the thing. And it seemed a little, well, yeah, I don't know what to do with that, but I got a hint of that, a little echo of that for the what it could mean to say that it's in the thing, that it has to be a thing with the potential to move, or if it's changing by way of knowledge, it has to be in a thing with which already has a potential for knowledge, that it just has to be actualized.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite quote, or one of them from the whole reading, was that one about change, where I forget the page exactly, but I could, you know, I could. Oh, maybe I can find it, maybe not. It's in the internal structure motion that necessarily this is on 159. Everything that is changed is changing beforehand, so that if a thing is changing, in order for it to change, there needs to be like some part of it that's already changing. So it seems very much like Aristotle is laying out kind of like that there are all these capacities in being, and that in order for that to happen, there needs to be something in the being itself to make that, like, to make it like even like turned towards that. I'm thinking, I think, I'm not sure if Allison, you were part of some of our being in time talks, but like that was the big thought that I loved about Heidegger, that he talks about all the time, that one of his big thing is like whenever he's trying to explain anything, he's like, well, it's there because we already have like some attunement towards it. Like we have an attunement towards authenticity because it's part of the structure of our being. And I think he's saying the very same thing about mover and moving and thing moved. That in the architecture of everything, there is, like you were saying, Greg, there is a potential for being moved, so that, I think essentially he's saying that motion is integral to all things. Because like that the eyesight and the light part is like is such a incredible analogy to me, because it seems to point exactly to that like, well, light would not exist unless we had eyesight.
And I've only read maybe like a little more than half of this book, but there's was something that also reminded me of like a phrase or an idea that kept reoccurring, that, and I don't know if it was alteration or, yeah, well, I think alteration is the thing he's dealing with now, but it has to involve perceptibles. And that idea or phrase just kept reoccurring.
Well, he also says in that thing, non-perceptible too, right? And it is the same way with the soulless and non-perceptive things on 177, unless I'm taking what you're saying uh in the wrong sense.
You know, I didn't start till after you guys had finished Heidegger, but when I was thinking about like with the, it is really interesting because like the taste, like if you could make the best meal in the world, but if you've got COVID and you've lost your taste, you're
Mm.
not going to taste it. It's dependent, and you know, it's like teaching. Like the teacher can teach all they want, but the kid also has to be ready to learn and willing to
Mhm.
learn. Otherwise, it doesn't work. But also, when you think, even when you think about motion, if you like if you push an old person, they might move slower because that's their nature is to move slower. And if you push a small child, they're gonna probably go flying because it's just their nature to generally move really fast. So it is interesting, like how I don't really, I mean, it's kind of like you see it all the time with light and hearing and taste, but you don't really think about it with motion, that it's dependent on not just who's pushing, but also what's being pushed.
Mhm.
But it is really interesting, like especially when you think about the difference between children and older people, they move differently, they just do. It's just kind of
Mhm.
part of their nature. Um, so yeah, I think even if you're pushing, like trying to get an object to move, a bicycle is going to move very differently from a gigantic truck, so it's kind of part of their nature, how they're going to move. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, no, I thought the last section was hard, but this one, not to say it's not hard, but I like it a lot more. Um, and I want to go to the very next paragraph. So, nor surely, this is on 177, nor surely is there anything between what is increased and what increases it. For the primary thing that causes increase causes it by coming to be present, so that the whole becomes one. And in turn, what causes decrease causes it by becoming absent of something belonging to the thing that is decreased. Then both what causes increase and what causes decrease must be continuous things, and nothing is between what is continuous. So here, Greg, he brings in um, that question that you were talking about in the very first paragraph of chapter 2 about being present. So he says here, when he's talking about increase and decrease, a fire decreasing a forest, that he's saying that like the a movement or a motion of increase or decrease, that whatever is increasing or decreasing, that thing needs to become present. Yeah, that it causes the increase or the decrease by becoming present. That's pretty cool.
And becoming absent might be cooler than becoming present. Um,
I mean, I really, yeah, I really like that idea that um of something that like eh, if there's going to be um some type of quantitative change in a thing, um whatever is causing that change. And like that's the other thing that was weird to me, is like it seems very much like um change and motion are change and motion seem somewhat similar, at least in this sense, that because an increase and a decrease is a change. Um but um but yeah, no, I like that idea that it kind of has to arise in that thing. And like just thinking about motion and something being moved and something moving, as that like something that like it needs to arise, um, and it needs to become present in that thing in order for the motion to happen.
And I see my sentence as the first sentence in chapter 3. Was that the one that you had about non-perceptibles? I think that was about soulless things. But first sentence of chapter 3 has that um, things have to be altered by perceptible things, but in the sense of capable of being perceived by something that has a soul, even if it's not in fact perceived, if it's something that lacks a soul.
Hmm. Yeah, were you talking about the line that says that this is at the beginning of chapter 3, that every altered thing is altered by perceptible things, and that alteration is present only in those things which are said in their own right to be acted on by perceptible things?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a line around 246a. We do not call a thing that has come into being, in which a shape is, after its shape or form, but we do call things after their attributes and alteration. It is clear that comings into being could not be alterations. I was a little confused about what he was getting at here, especially when he was talking about shapes. We do not call a thing that has come into being. Let's read from 10. When the thing that is shaped and arranged is completed, we do not say that it is what it is made of. For example, that statue is bronze, or the taper wax, or the bed wood. But using derivative terms, we call them brazen, wax, and wood. Okay, so attributes. But we do call a thing that has been affected and altered by the name of its attribute. For we say that the bronze or wax is fluid or hot or hard, and not only that way, but we also call the fluid or hot thing bronze, calling the material by the same name as the attribute. If therefore we do not call a thing that has come into being, in which a shape is, after its shape or form, but we do call things after their attributes and alterations, it is clear that comings into being could not be alterations. So if we take the line previous about increasing decrease as being like a coming to be present in the one thing, so it seems like he's trying to make a point here that movement is not like change? Question mark.
That it seems like it's that Genesis is not like alteration.
I'm sorry. Is he saying that because when something is moving, its shape isn't changing? It's not changing the nature of what it is. It's just moving from one location to another. Whereas something like bronze or wax that can be fluid or, that's actually changing its shape. And that's not the same, it's altering what it is, which is not the same thing as, like a bronze statue melting is very different from a bronze statue that's here and then you pick it up and then you carry it 3 blocks away, because it's staying the same. It's not altering what it is.
So let me read the next line. And even to speak in this way would seem to be absurd. To say that the human being or the house or anything else that has come into being has been altered. In order that each thing come into being, it is perhaps necessary that something be altered, such as the material that is dense or rare or hot or cold, but it is surely not the things that come into being that are altered, nor is the coming into being of them an alteration. I think what you were saying, Allison, is correct. Is that like um any change that happens to the thing that you know, if you know, the head, what is it, the arms of that of Aphrodite or whatever, that, you know, famous statue that are missing, like that that alteration, I still don't understand why he's connecting this like right after motion. Like that's because it would seem like that change and motion are similar, you know, at least in what I was understanding, whenever he was saying that that one line that Greg talked about where it says they are in the same place. Um, but yeah, I don't understand what he's trying to get at with alteration here. Like, is he
Um,
bringing you up to point at like, hey, it's not like change?
but there's
Yeah.
it because this chapter is about alteration, and like a maybe the previous or the one before was about kinesis, movement in place. And yeah, those three types of change, which does also say are four, that quantity, quality, and location. And so like previous chapter, and those are all different kinds of change. I'm trying to remember the words. I think like metabole was the one for change, and that's the larger category that contains kinesis, and this is some longer word with an alpha and two L's. That's alteration. So it's, although all change in some senses is movement, but not automatically movement in place. And so these kinds of changes, alterations, shouldn't have to necessarily be movements in place, because that's kinesis and in the previous book.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm kind of thinking of like evaporation. Um, you know, or like say you boil water and then you see the steam coming out and it is moving at that point. But really what it's doing is it's changing its form. You know, it might eventually like move out and drift down and go up, but really what's happening essentially though is that as the water boils, it's changing its form. So it's becoming something else. So that's different from movement. I think the reason he's bringing this up is because he wants to call attention to the difference between the two. I mean, one thing that I was thinking with this is that, you know, I was really struck when we first started reading this about how similar it was to Newton's laws, and I felt like Newton ripped everything off, and he did. He got a lot of these ideas, but what I'm realizing is that Newton's laws essentially they're like the tip of the iceberg. You know, like it's like he barely touches on things, and I feel like what Aristotle does is so much deeper on so many, and maybe he didn't get everything right, but it's so much deeper and all encompassing, you know, than Newton. I mean, maybe I haven't read enough Newton, but it kind of seems like that's the big difference, is that he's sort of going into so much more beyond just motion.
Yeah, I think that like when you start throwing in being into the equation, he is talking a lot. He's talking about a lot more. That's where
Yeah.
the philosopher comes in, whereas Newton's just a physicist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, now the next weird part about chapter 3 is how he starts switching it and talking about vices and virtues. Um, and excellences. So this is on 179. Further, we say that all excellences consist in holding a certain relation. For those of the body, such as health and fitness, we place in the blending and due measure of the hot and the cold, either of themselves in relation to themselves in the things within, or in relation to their surroundings. And similarly with beauty and strength and the other excellences and defects. For each consists in holding a certain relation, and disposes the thing having it well or badly towards its proper attributes, proper being those by which it by nature comes into being or is destroyed. Since then, relations are not themselves alterations, nor is there alteration of them, nor becoming, nor in general any change at all, it is clear that neither active states, nor the losing or taking on of active states are alterations. So in order that they come into being or be destroyed, it is perhaps necessary that some things be altered, exactly as with the form or shape, such as the hot and the cold, or the dry and the moist, or those things in which these happen first to be present. For each defect or excellence is spoken of in relation to those things by which the thing having it is of such a nature as to be altered. For the excellence makes it be either unaffected or subjected to be affected in just a certain way, while the defect makes it contrarily subject to be affected or unaffected. What are we making for this idea of the relation? He seems to say in he seems to say in the middle, and disposes the thing having it well or badly towards its proper attributes, proper being those by which it by nature comes into being or is destroyed. Um, that wasn't the one. Oh, for those of the body such as health and fitness, we place in the blending and due measure of the hot and the cold, either of themselves in relation to themselves and the things within, or in the relation to their surroundings. So this link to hot and cold, I don't understand at all, but I'm wondering, is he saying for the relation like for health and fitness, the relation to something inside of them, so like a healthy body, or the relation to their surroundings, like living in a healthy place? I don't know. Like what is he talking about here with this relation? It's really weird.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't want to take a huge leap to his ethical thing, the golden mean, or the mean between extremes, but which I was looking at so many of the terms that come up really soon that involved teleology words, that in a deficit and an excellence are both, and that would be a vice and a virtue, are both in relation to the ideal completed state that something's supposed to be in. And a virtue is just shy of the completed state. It's something that makes you capable of reaching that completed state. And so a virtue or an excellence and a vice or a defect, I guess one option is that they're in relation to each other, but I think it's that they're in relation to the purpose or the completion of the thing that can fail to be what it's supposed to be.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, he brings in virtues here, so um, so I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about it. How does that work with the active states? Because that comes up a few times here. Um, let me read what's on in the bottom paragraph. Virtues and vices will not be alterations either, nor will the losses or takings on of them. But in order that they come into being, it is necessary that the perceptive part be altered. And this will have been altered by perceptible things, for all moral virtue is involved with bodily pleasures and pains, and these are present in acting or in remembering or in expecting. So, and I wonder if this is what he's getting at by active state. So, virtues and vices are not alterations, but this paragraph is supposed to be about alteration, right? So why did we even bring it up? But in order for a virtue or vice to even come into being, the perceptive part, so I guess the person, also needs to be altered. So that there's like some type of physical manifestation of the virtue and vice in the body. I really just don't understand what this all has to do with motion.
Well, the perceptive part kind of goes back to what he was saying before about like with hearing and taste and everything, that it has to be you can't hear something if you're deaf, you know, so you have to be able to be perceptive to hear it, and you have to have the, you know, like you have to have taste buds in order to perceive what's actually there. So when he's saying something about it's necessary that the perceptive part be altered, that's what I'm confused with that.
Well, what that seems the clearest part to me. What is confusing to you about that part? That the perceptive part needs to be altered.
Um, no, that makes sense. It's just when he's saying that the virtues and vices will not be altered. Neither will the losses, but in order that they come into being, it is necessary that the perceptive part be altered. Well, yeah, if you're gonna change your virtues and your vices, you've got to be aware that you're trying to do it, I guess.
Or you have to detect pleasure and pain in order to be drawn to them.
Yeah.
But I don't know why he's using exclusively a ensouled thing, because every commentary and footnote always emphasizes that virtue isn't limited to a moral category, that inanimate things can have virtues, anything that has some purpose. The a knife's purpose is to cut, and so it's a virtue or an excellence of a knife that it be sharp. And so I don't know why he, in this section about virtues and vices, he seems to be exclusively talking about humans, when he's not. That's not supposed to be the case. In some broader perspective, it's not. Virtues and vices aren't limited to things that are capable of perceiving, or, well, yeah, since inanimate objects can have excellences, virtues, or they can be have deficits or vices. But this whole little section, he's only talking about a soul.
And I'm wondering why he's including this when he's talking about motion.
Mhm.
Or maybe because altering your virtues is a form of motion. In a way.
But virtues aren't alterations. So he wants to stop us from thinking in a wrong direction because there's one of those transition paragraphs where he gives one of those, but it may appear or you may think that um, that virtues are alterations or changes in virtues are alterations, but they aren't. And so like he has this whole section to convince us that these are not alterations, even though the big chapters on alterations.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the end of chapter 3. It seems like the point is trying to try that. He says, it is clear then from the things said that being altered and alteration come about in perceptible things and in the perceptive part of the soul, but in no other thing except incidentally. And because remember that he's saying that there are three motions, and then there must in the movers there must be a 3-2. What carries something along, what alters something, and what increases or decreases something. So like chapter 3 is like a further discussion of alteration, and it seems like the driving point is of all of it is that it needs to be it needs to come about perceptibly. And only the one, I guess, only something with the perceptive part of the soul can see it, I think. But again, like I I was thinking the same thing that you were, Allison, and I was like, oh, that was one of the three aspects of the mover, which is very interesting. Um, but can we move on to chapter 4? Is everyone fine with that?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to start at the beginning. One might be at an impasse whether every motion is comparable with every other one or not. Now, if they are all comparable, and if something of the same speed is moved in an equal amount in an equal time, there will be something circular equal to a straight line, as well as greater or less. What is more, an alteration and some change of place would be equal, whenever in an equal time one thing is altered and another carried along. Therefore, there would be a condition equal to a length, but this is impossible. But is there not an equal speed just whenever a thing is moved an equal amount in an equal time, while there is no condition equal to a length, and thus no alteration equal to or less than a change of place, so that not all motions are comparable? But how will the answer turn out for the circle and the straight line?
Mm.
And then he gets into his all A-B stuff. So here he's trying in chapter 4, at least if I'm understanding, he's trying to compare motions. And the two ways he's kind of outlining is through speed and through distance. Does that seem like a true statement?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's speed and then change of pace. And
I don't understand the circle equal to a straight line part. I don't see where he gets that from. seems like an odd thing to throw in there.
And then the point is that not all motions are comparable, but I'm wondering who would have thought they were in the first place. His examples, just because you're using the same word, double, a lot, or a certain distance, whether it's on a straight line or in a circle, that doesn't make them comparable, that it's the word is being used in this ambiguous way, but I don't see his target that he's arguing against. Who
It's probably someone. He's always got an axe to grind, this guy. But yeah, so I definitely think that's what he's talking at. Let's see where he goes with it. Okay, I think that's where he goes with it. So 182. But then must things that are comparable not only be ambiguous, but not even have a difference in either what is compared or that in which it is? I mean, for example, that color has a division, and so things are not comparable in respect to this, such as which is more colored, not in respect to some particular color, but just its color, but in respect to whiteness. So too with motion, what has the same speed is moved in an equal time at a certain equal amount. So if in this time some of the length is altered and the other part is carried along, is this alteration equal to and of the same speed as the change of place? It is absurd. And the reason is that motion has forms. Yeah, maybe this is where it's going. So then if things carried along through an equal length in an equal time will be of equal speed, the straight line and circular one will be equal. Which is the reason then that change of place is a kind or that a line is a kind? For the time is the same, but if the lines are different in form, those changes of place to different forms. For a change of place has forms if that along which it is moved has form. Okay, let's just stop there for now.
You know what I think is interesting about this is that I feel like in our I don't know, mechanical world that we live in, we always seem to think that, we kind of think of people as machines, and that we're always supposed to be able to do the same thing, the same, effort equals the same reward or whatever. And what's kind of interesting is how he's showing, way back when, how none of that is true, and that everything has to do with the object that's being moved, the speed. Are you going in a straight line? Are you going in a circle? Everything is relative, you know?
So you're saying that do you think that him talking about that change of place has a form and that motion has a form? Do you mean he's saying that it's relative to the situation that it's in? Is that what you think he's getting at there?
Yeah. Yeah, everything depends on, where you are, what it's doing, what's moving, what's affecting it move. Yeah, and it's all completely relative. It's not the same. And it's so funny because it's so different from like science, the way it's taught, to children, where if you can repeat the experiment over and over and over again, then it must be true. Where he's doing kind of the exact opposite, saying, well, no, because this is going to affect it, and that's going to affect it, and this is going to affect it. It's always going to be a little bit different. It's very interesting because it's so completely different from how, what we think. But the thing is, I feel like he's more accurate. Like if you give a medicine to one person, it's going to have a slightly different effect than to somebody else. So that's why dosage is important, because Is it a child? Is it an adult? Is it,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't considered that way of looking at it as being, that he expressing like some type of uh relativeness, or that it's yeah, but I like that. So then he's making um a connection between the lines are different in form, one is straight, one is circular, so that the changes of place too are different in form. So he's basically talking that he's kind of getting at that so it seems that like if the straight line and the circular, if it's the same distance and the same amount of time has passed, what is his question then? What does he say is absurd? So if in this time some of the length is altered in another part and other part and the other part is carried along, is this alteration equal to and of the same speed as the change of place? It is absurd. For the time is the same, but the lines are different in form, those changes of place too different. For change of place also has form, and that along which it is moved has forms. Aren't those the same thing? Change of place and that along which it is moved. Let me go to therefore. I always look for therefores in Aristotle's paragraphs. Therefore, things move through the same magnitude in an equal time are of equal speed. But the same magnitude has to be non-different in form as well as non-different in motion. So this must be examined. What a difference of motion is. And this argument implies that a kind is not some one thing, but a manyness is within it unnoticed. And some of the ambiguities that there are hold a great distance from each other, while others have some similarities, and yet others are very near either in kind or by analogy, on which account they do not seem to be ambiguous. When then is the form different? Well, let's just stop there. This argument implies that a kind is not some one thing, but a manyness is within it unnoticed. And some of the ambiguities that there are hold a great distance from each other, while others have some similarities yet. So that there, he says that motion has times, change of place has times. So here he's saying that a kind is not one thing, but there can be many things in it. So a kind of distance can have like numerous ways or numerous distances, or I don't know about distances, but this line about but a manyness is within it unnoticed is interesting. Like a kind of line seems to hide more lines than we're actually thinking of.
Well, it's like a human being, like you think, okay, this is this person, but there's all this manyness that's inside of us that we don't see.
Mm.
Like if you cut us up, there's going to be a spleen and a liver and all sorts of things. But you can't necessarily see it from the outside. So a line can be the same way that if you were to go deep inside of it, you're going to see so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like
So
the
then,
atom.
yeah. What?
It's like the atom, like if you get a microscope, you start looking at things, you're going to see so much more. So that manyness inside all sorts of things that we don't,
Mm-hmm.
but it's there.
Yeah, that's a nice line. That a kind is not some one thing, but in manyness is within it unnoticed. I guess, like a lot of, not a lot, but, sometimes when we've been reading the physics, I kind of been like, I don't see what the point is. Like, are you arguing with someone? What you're saying seems kind of obvious to me. And then other parts, like the part we read before with, about the motion, I was like, oh, that is super interesting. That's about the motion, the mover and the move, having this link together. Okay, where did I stop?
I think also like some of what he says, it seems so obvious because we've had so many years of science since when he wrote this.
Yeah,
But when you think about him just walking around the agora, coming up with this stuff was under a bush or something, it's mind-boggling that he did it,
yeah,
and he did it
Yeah.
without a microscope. Well, how did he figure out that things have manyness within them? Well, he was right, but he didn't have any tools to figure it out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we lost Craig. Maybe his cat went crazy. Okay. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that was kind of the last place that I really wanted to look at.
Yeah. All right.
You happy with stopping here too, Allison?
Yeah, I'm good with it. Yeah, definitely.